Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss about Azure Storage Redundancy. In the previous video, we talked about Azure Storage account. When we are creating the storage account, we have been given with the option of performance. So when we select the performance, again, we have two options to select. One is standard and the other one is premium. When I choose standard, I am able to create blobs, tables, queue, files, and page. So these are the types of services which I am able to create when I select the standard. When I select the standard Gen V2, I am also able to use data lake. These are the storage services which are available when I select standard, right? And the redundancy what is available when you select the standard is LRS, locally redundant storage, ZRS, zone redundant storage, RAGRS, read access geo-redundant storage, GZRS, which is nothing but globally zone redundant storage, and RAGZRS. So these are the redundancy type what we have when I select the standard storage. And if I choose the performance as premium, I have again multiple options to choose, which are nothing but premium block blobs. One is premium block blobs. This will support the redundancy of LRS and ZRS. I have another type in premium, which is file shares, which is nothing but premium file shares. This also supports LRS and ZRS. And page blobs. This will support only LRS. Whenever you store any data in the Azure storage, multiple copies will be created. If I use LRS, there will be minimum of 3 copies which will be created. This will protect from unplanned events such as hardware failures, network failures, or power outages, or even natural disasters. Redundancy ensures that your storage account meets its availability and durability. Since we have copied the data into multiple locations, we have multiple copies of the data. Even if one of the copy is not available, there are other 2 copies which are available, right? And these copies should be durable. The data what we have created and copied to multiple location, is it durable? Is it as the same integrity when we created the data, or the data has changed? For example, if I take the Word, I have the Word file, but there is no content. So that means the data is not durable. When deciding which redundancy option is best for your scenario, consider the trade-offs between lower costs and higher availability. If you are selecting LRS as the redundancy, then this will be the cheapest option because you are storing your data in the same location, in the same availability zone, and in the same data center. So this will be the cheapest and it will have high performance because it is stored in the same region and same data center. The factors which will help to determine which redundancy option we need is while creating the storage account itself. So when you create a storage account, you have an option to select which region you wanted to place your data. The region which you are going to select, for example, Europe, North. If you have selected this region, this is the region which will be primary region. And if you have selected LRS, 3 copies will be placed in this same region in the same availability zone. If I wanted to copy the same data to another region, the region pairing comes into picture. So if this is Europe North and this is Europe West is Netherlands and Europe North is Ireland. So this is the region pairing. It will only copy to the other region which has pairing. 3 copies will be placed here in the Netherlands region. So this is when you select geographically distant to the primary region, because the distance between these two regions are somewhere between 300 miles away. If your application wanted to have read access from the secondary region, you can have read access GRS, which is geographically redundant storage, read access with geographically redundant storage. So one of the copy out of the 3 copies can be read only. So the primary copy will be read write. So this copy will be read write, and the copy which has been stored to another region can be accessed with read only permission, right? So this is useful when we run some kind of data analytics. I am not touching the primary data because of performance issue. If I touch the primary data, then I am accessing the primary data source, which will impact the performance of my primary data. So for doing the data analytics, I can use one of the copy which has been stored in the secondary region. I can run my data analytics and I can generate the reports. So since I am using only the read only, there is nothing to worry about writing the data and getting the replicated in the reverse direction. So it will not write the data to the primary region. So it is always read only. Let us see the redundancy option one by one. Redundancy in primary region. If I am selecting the locally redundant storage, then we are going to keep the data of 3 copies in the same region in the same data center. If I am selecting the ZRS option, which is in the primary region. So primary region, we can have LRS and ZRS. So this is in North Europe. These two are region specific. So when I say region specific, we have 3 availability zone: AZ1, AZ2 and AZ3. So we have 3 availability zone. If I am selecting LRS as the redundancy, in one of the availability zone, we have the data center. In that data center, we have something called as update domain, fault domain and update domain. So these are the racks. These are called as storage TAMs in Azure terms. So basically we have racks and racks of storage, which is nothing but the disks. So when you store the data using the LRS option, one of the copy will be stored in one of the rack. So this we can take example of rack 0, rack 1, rack 2. So the second copy will be stored in rack number 1 and the third copy will be stored in rack number 2. When there is a failure of the availability zone 1, the entire 3 copies will be lost. So basically you lose all your data and these data will not be recoverable. So there is a complete data loss when you use the LRS and when the availability zone itself, it is done. So that is the reason we need to choose the ZRS option. in case if I wanted to have high availability, then instead of going with LRS, I will choose ZRS. So when I choose ZRS instead of LRS, there is a trade-off of cost and performance. So we have high availability, but the cost will be little bit more when you compare with the LRS. So locally redundant storage LRS replicates your data 3 times within a single data center. Within a single data center in the primary region. And LRS provides 11 nines of durability. So if you see this picture, copy 1, copy 2 and copy 3, which is stored in the same data center, this will be your locally redundant storage. When you create a storage account, if you select locally redundant storage, which is LRS, then 3 copy will be created in the same data center using the fault domain and update domain strategy. LRS is the lowest cost redundancy option and offers the least durability compared to other options. LRS protects your data against server and rack failures and also drive failures. If there is any failure of the rack, or the hard drive in this rack, it will protect unless and until there is a failure of the entire availability zone. Let us see what is zone redundant storage. When you choose redundancy as zone redundant, you have an option of placing your data in multiple zones. So we have the region which is Europe North. One of the copy will be stored in availability zone 1 and availability zone 2 and availability zone 3. The second copy will be stored in availability zone 2 and the third copy will be stored in availability zone 3. So this is how the data will be stored in multiple zones. Even if the rack failures or the availability zone itself fails, we have the data available in another zones. So the copy of the data will be placed in one of the zones here, in one of the zone here, which is zone 2 and zone 3. And ZRS offers 12 nines of durability in a given year. So what are the benefits of using the ZRS? When you choose ZRS, your data is still accessible even if one of these availability zone fails. And if you are using as the Azure file shares, there is no need for you to unmount and remount. The DNS records will be automatically updated. Microsoft recommends using ZRS in the primary region because even if one of the zone fails, the other zones will be available and still your data will be accessible. So that is where you get the high availability when you choose ZRS compared to the LRS. So ZRS is also recommended when you wanted to store the data in a particular region for the governance. It can be government regulations or to meet any security criteria. Let us see why we wanted to store the data in a different region. For applications requiring high availability, you can choose additional copy to be in a secondary region. So there is a primary region, which is Europe North. This is Ireland. And I wanted to store or I wanted to replicate the data from Ireland to Europe West, which is Netherlands. We know that the distance between these two regions will be hundreds of miles away. So this is the strategic decision how Azure places their data centers in different region. So why do I want to place the data in different region? I have 3 copies already here. So I have the second copy here in this Europe North region. I have 4th, 5th and 6th copy in a different region, which is Europe West. If there is a catastrophe And if there is a failure of this particular region, there is an outage, there is a disaster in Europe North, my data should be accessible. I will not be able to access in case of any outage in the Europe North. By keeping my data in a separate region, I still have the access to these data. So that is why I replicate the data using geo-redundant storage between one region to another region, which is hundreds of miles away. So when you select the primary region, you will not be able to change this primary region. Based on the selection of the primary region, the data will be replicated to the secondary region. If you say, I have selected primary region as Europe North and I wanted to replicate this data to Singapore data center. Singapore region. So this is not possible. Only to the paired region, the other 3 copies will be replicated. There are 2 options which are offered by Azure to store the data in multiple regions. One is geo-redundant storage and geo-zone redundant storage, which is GZRS and GRS. GRS is similar to the LRS in 2 regions, and GZRS is similar to running ZRS in the primary region and LRS in the secondary region. Basically, when you use GRS, this is how the data will be stored. So this example is basically the GRS kind of redundancy. And when you choose the GRS redundancy, you will have 16 nines of durability of your data in a given year. In this image for the GRS, you can see there are 3 copies in the primary region and there are 3 copies in the secondary region. This is geo replication and this is in the primary region and these 3 copies in the secondary region. If there is an outage in the primary region, you have your data still accessible. Either Microsoft has to fail over to the secondary region or manually the customer has to fail over to the secondary region. Only then you will be able to do the read-write access. Until and unless you do the failover, you will not be able to access this particular data, which is in different region. So let us see what is geo-zone redundant storage. In geo-zone redundant storage, we have 3 copies in different availability zones. So these are 3 availability zones. The data has been replicated to another region and the data will be stored as 3 copies in the same availability zone. So this is, if I take this as availability zone 1, in geo-zone redundant storage, the secondary region will store the 3 copies in the same availability zone, whereas in the primary region, one of the copy will be stored in one availability zone, the second copy will be stored in availability zone 2, and the third copy will be stored in availability zone 3. Microsoft recommends using GRS for applications requiring maximum consistency, durability, and if you wanted to have disaster recovery facility, then you can go with the GZRS type of redundancy. GZRS is designed to provide at least 16 nines of durability in a given year. As I said, if I wanted to do some kind of analytics or reporting, I need to have read access for one of my copies, which is placed in the secondary region. If I take the primary region, we have 3 copies, and these 3 copies are stored in the primary region. So this is the odd data. I don't want to touch this because it is going to impact the performance of my applications. The applications are continuously writing to the primary region, and once it writes, there is a copy of the data which has been created inside the primary region. This data I don't want to touch for any analytics. I will replicate this data using the redundancy option, choosing either RAGRS or RAGZRS. I wanted one of the copy as read only copy. So this is my 456. So one of the copy I wanted to use for my reporting or business analytics. I will choose the redundancy as RAGRS or RAGZRS. I will use my application to run the analytics and get the reporting without touching the primary data. So this is very useful when you select RAGRS type of redundancy option. So we have looked into the redundancy part of the Azure storage. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the content, please subscribe and share the video. Thank you and take care.